All right, Craig, you've teased it already. What's tip number 3, please?
Tip number 3. I'm going to start with two past experiences of mine, and then I'll say what it is. So once it was a long time ago. It wasn't for my current trust, I need to say. It was in some CPD around direct instruction, and on the board there. This is when it was sort of first coming round, or coming around at this school. Lots of us hadn't heard of it. Was all the good things that direct instruction involves, and how you should deliver it in the classroom. And not a single principle was being used by the presenter. You should model things. You check for understanding. Rather than just reading it. Second one, even more obvious, sitting in CPD, while someone reads from a slide about how when teaching children, you shouldn't read from a slide, because the listening and the reading gets the same part of the brain. So this tip is to please realise that the findings from cognitive science apply to all of us. We use them in classrooms, and we use them as great principles for teaching. We share success criteria, we use explicit modelling, we scaffold the process, we give a chance to practice, we receive feedback. It's not because that's how kids learn best, it's because that's how humans learn best. The majority of research on cognitive science, I think I'm right in saying it's probably done with university graduates and people that have got more of an adult brain than they do a sort of a young adolescent brain. So if anything, it should apply even more to us than it should to the students. And then for some reason, it just doesn't happen when people deliver CPD. They might be a great classroom teacher, but they're assuming, maybe it's because they don't want to be patronising, I don't know what it is, but the idea, I think, of novice versus expert, I think blurs people's views here, because teachers will be an expert in loads of things, but they might be an expert marker, an expert at subject knowledge. Doesn't mean they're an expert at using a mini whiteboard or cold calling. If your CPD is worth delivering to the people that are in front of you, they won't already be experts. So all the things you would do for novices in your classroom that I mentioned earlier, do them for the adults. And then, like I said earlier around lethal mutations, this is what will happen if you don't explicitly model things, if you don't check for understanding. I've got an example here of a framework I used for getting mini whiteboard use sort of endemic across a department, and it isn't tell the teachers to use a mini whiteboard. There's like 6 different strands to it. All the pre-planning you need to do, all the training you need to do. How are you going to deliver it? What scripts are you going to use? Are you going to model it? Are you going to show them some non-examples of when it doesn't work? The whole thing about mini whiteboards is you need to be responsive. So show them multiple times. If they all get it right, do this. If they all get it wrong, do this. If there's 2 or 3 kids that get it right, or get it wrong and the rest get it right, then what do you do? And model it. Model it explicitly. All the great advice that people have heard around what they should do for children, do it for adults. It isn't patronising, and it'll feel weird at first, especially if you want to get people to do sort of Duglamov techniques or things that are active. If you want your staff to practice it and be good at it, they have to model it. They have to do it in front of other adults, and it'll feel weird the first time, but it won't feel weird for long. The best CPD is a bit active, and sounds like all the things that make teaching quite woolly back in the day. Get your kids up and that, but it's about practicing the routine. We do lots of practical things as teachers, so practice it practically. Normalise that behaviour. Get people up, coaching each other within the CPD. Correct them if they're not doing it right. So tell them how to do it better. And again, the same way that you would use retrieval practice. Come back to the CPD. Same way that you would mark their work and give them feedback. Go around and observe lessons, and then what are the biggest misconceptions that you've seen when it's being delivered? Address that. Map out time to not just introduce the idea, but the worst case, if they haven't all got it wrong or haven't all got it right, in 3 weeks' time, we need 1 more CPD booked in, and after that, we might be able to disseminate to heads of department who can then make little tweaks. Plan for all these things. We don't live in a sort of a one and done world of they've seen it once, they can all do it now, and we know that in the classroom. For some reason, we don't know it when we deliver training to adults. So please remember that cognitive science, all these things that make great teaching, make a great CPD as well.
Flipping out, right, okay. I don't think I've ever written so much. Like, it's just going beyond the joke list now. Right, let's go in with this. So first thing to say is I'm thinking of reissuing my How I Wish I'd Taught Maths book to be How I Wish I'd Delivered CPD, because I'm starting to realise this myself, that it does seem to be completely different how CPD happens versus what we think about effective lessons. And I'd never realised that before. About you're absolutely right. The fact that a lot of the participants in the Cog Sci studies are university students is a really smart observation. So that if it's going to probably apply more to adults than it is to some of our younger learners. I really like that. Second thing to say is, anytime I walk into I hate group work. I've thrown this out there many times. And anytime I walk into a CPD session where I see the tables in groups, I just think, nice. And first I think this is going to be really awkward because I don't particularly want to do this. And then secondly, I think I'm probably going to be able to sit off a little bit here and just let other members of the group take the lead and so on. I want to pick up that I find this really interesting. So I deliver a lot of CPD myself. Whilst you've been speaking, I've been thinking about this a lot over the last few months anyway, because I've had a few conversations with people like Adam Boxer about this. Why my CPD doesn't mirror more closely what I do in the classroom, and I think you've hit the nail on the head with this patronising thing. So I do a lot of CPD using diagnostic questions, so I'm big into diagnostic questions and so on. Now, the problem I always run into is what I want. I always say to delegates, I say, right, you've got two roles to play here. I want you to play the role of your learners, because I need you to experience what this is like as your kids. And then we need to take our learner hat on and put our teacher hat on and think, right, what does this look like in our classroom? And that feels to me, like a sensible approach. The problem is it's quite hard to generate what it's going to feel like to be learners because of this classic curse of knowledge that we have. So if I'm working with a group of maths teachers and I put up, diagnostic question on adding two fractions together, they all know the answer. So when I say, okay, let's vote, they either are all honest and everyone votes for the right answer, and then it's hard for me to model how to respond, or they have to try and help me out of it. Some of them, put C up, and then they have to pretend not to know, and it feels inauthentic. And when I was talking to Kieran Mackle, who's a primary colleague, he says that when he does primary CPD, he purposely uses Key Stage 3 content that is a little bit outside of the regular experience of the primary colleagues, so they feel a bit more like students, so that they can better appreciate it. But I think that's a little bit harder for secondary colleagues because, if I'm speaking to a mixed audience, what am I doing, whipping up a further maths question or something like that, so I'll just pause there. Do you see a bit of that? Do you think that's part of the reason why perhaps sometimes CPD isn't quite as effective, because we can't make the participants feel like our kids are going to feel?
And that's definitely part of it in terms of them seeing the benefits of it. So I've delivered CPD when I was head of the department. I was the only person that was teaching decision maths. Yeah. So when I did modelling, I grabbed something from there.
Yeah, it's good.
Our trust got a big CPD conference recently. Kieran Mackle was there, he spoke to our maths teachers, which was great. We had Daisy Christodoulou talking about assessment. She did a multiple choice question. What's capital Moldova? No clue. And it was those things that you can find. It doesn't need to be maths related. It doesn't need to be further maths. If you want to prove how diagnostic questions work, choose something from whatever domain you want. You'd want them to see how you react, how you do something with that knowledge. The maths isn't the important bit. Like earlier, the numbers aren't the important bit. The maths isn't the important bit. It's what you do with that information that matters. I think it is an issue, and it's really hard for teachers to learn what it's like being a student. Really, really hard. I would say go out of the school domain where possible. General knowledge, things like that, where you will alienate some people, but that's sort of what you want sometimes, I think.
Yeah, smart. Makes a lot of sense. Just a few more points on this. I don't know what point I'm up to now, who knows. But one thing I've been dabbling a lot with is this kind of CPD via stealth. So this is the idea that, mini whiteboards, everybody's chatting on mini whiteboards at the moment, but if you want to do CPD on mini whiteboards, sometimes it's a good idea to do the CPD almost on something else, but use the mini whiteboards to facilitate it. So if you want, if you're doing modelling or something like that, everyone's got a mini whiteboard, and then you can say to people something like, okay, write down the three most difficult things you find when you're modelling yourself. Okay, hold that up so I can see. Oh, amazing. Jane, tell me a bit more about that. Swap with your partner and so on. And then almost at the end of this session, it's almost like a big reveal and say, oh, look, we've been using mini whiteboards. What worked well with that? What do you see any value in that at all, or is that a bit sneaky?
100%. I was, as long as you do that bit at the end, right? As long as you make it explicit, that's the important bit. I've seen people model, try and do that by but too stealthy. It's like at some point you've got to tell them what you've been doing and why it's been beneficial for you and how you use it in your practice, for sure. I think it depends on your audience and where they're at. It depends on how good they are at using that thing. Do they need all the time focusing just on mini whiteboards, or if it's if you've delivered that CPD once and you're revisiting them in 6 months' time, that might be where you do that refresher of that. It's retrieval practice.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to take the forefront because it's retrieval. They know the basics. But if you want them to, because they weren't focusing on the routines you were doing at the time, if you then say at the end, but that was your main focus, it probably won't land as much. But if it's retrieval, if it's part of something else, then I think 100%.
Interesting. Right, final 2 points on this. I could chat to you all day about this. One is just an observation from me. So I'm obsessed with Atomic Habits, the book by James Clear. I don't know if you've read it. It's sold like 20 million copies or something like that. So I'm not exactly new to the party with this. But he cites a really interesting study that I've used a lot with CPD, and that is this. It's called some like implementation statement or an implementation action or something like that. And it's the idea that, let's say the study was about like diets and exercise and stuff. If you say, you get all this motivational material and you think, right, okay, I'm definitely going to go to the gym, I'm going to go next week, it never happens. Whereas if you say, I'm going to go Wednesday 10 o'clock, like the jump up in participation rate is something like 40% increase or something like that. I wonder whether this is true in CPD, that you leave CPD with all these good intentions and life gets in the way. Whereas if you state the exact time you are going to do something for the first time, it's more likely to happen. What's your thoughts on that?
100%. So a few things you can do within your CPD is give people, well, one, we'll stick with mini whiteboards because I love mini whiteboards. One, if they've practiced it within your lesson or within your CPD, it's less of a strain on them to then do it in the classroom because they've practiced it. Also, at the end of that CPD, get them to grab the laptops or whatever. Right, we've got 10 minutes left over now. Look at lessons coming up. Find the class you're worrying about the least other stuff with.
Yeah, that's good.
And a lesson that will work best for it. And now produce a set of questions or start to produce it. Hopefully, they can finish it. But if they at least get started, they know that time. And then you say, tell your colleagues, send an email to your HOD. They're going to come, if they can catch you at that time doing it, great. If not, alas, and problem is over. But 100% get them to commit to, give them some time to start to work on it within that CPD. Like you say, otherwise they're going to walk out the door and then, I'm teaching this tomorrow and I'm doing that and I'm photocopying and life will get in the way. So yes, get them to commit it and get them to tell someone else. If that person ends up coming to the classroom or not, I bet it, like you say, it's going to increase the success rate of them delivering it. 100% do that. Yes.
One final thing on this, Craig. I think this is where a lot of CPD falls down. Is it doesn't have the follow up. It tends to be one off things. Now I experienced this myself when I'm called in as like an external speaker or whatever. It's always a bit frustrating for me because I can leave the sessions thinking, okay, that seemed to go well, people seem to enjoy it and so on, but I have no idea what happens unless I can come back again 3 months later or whatever. I have no idea. But when you deliver CPD within your own school or a group of schools you've got a relationship with, it's much easier to do the follow-up. But what I've never thought to do, and it's such a simple idea that which you've said there, is this idea of observing where possible colleagues doing it, but then spotting misconceptions just as you would do within a lesson, and then the follow-up session almost starts as if you've marked a load of homework with, okay, here's some examples of really good things I've seen, here's some examples of something that's almost good, but if I describe it to you, can you see what could have made it a bit better? All that stuff that would be so normal and natural to do in lesson doesn't happen enough, does it, with CPD, either for kind of practical reasons or just because people don't realise it's a smart thing to do.
Yeah, the danger, the amount of people try and buy someone in to do a thing, which is fine. If you want to come and work on any of our schools, you can. But we're going to make sure that once you're gone, if you're not coming back in, we build something to chase up on it again. The danger is that, again, that sort of one and done. Oh, Craig Martin came in. Why can't you all use mini whiteboards now? Why can't you all use diagnostic questions properly now? It's like, well, because people learned it once. Same as you say to it. It's the exact same. Oh, I taught these kids Pythagoras a month ago, but now they can't do it. Of course they can't do it anymore. It's in there, and you just need to retrieve it, and you need to tweak it, and you need to do all these things that make great teaching. Just apply it to CPD. Whether it's the original speaker you get that came in, or whether it's someone in house then grabs that board and sort of keeps it rolling. Maybe something worth doing. Speak to them. Great question for them. Like, how are you going to follow this up? And obviously, it's not on you at all. It's on them, but just might encourage it lasting a bit longer.
Brilliant.